That was some sparring footage of Lawrence Okolie and Dillian Whyte that Okolie has released online. And it followed a bit of an escalating war of words between the two. Okolie, a cruiserweight who's been operating at domestic level in the UK. He's looking to step up to sort of fringe world level, but also potentially down the line because he's 6'5", pretty well built. He most likely is going to go to heavyweight. And he is managed by Anthony Joshua. And Dillian Whyte doesn't really have a lot of time for Joshua, and apparently neither Okolie. And this sort of bubbled up over the weekend, out of nowhere really, the genesis of what has been sort of discussed between fans, but also some of the stuff that's been online seems to be a number of things. There has been some suggestion that it relates to Whyte's prospect Richard Riakporhe, who is a cruiserweight, similarly to Okolie, that there's some sort of bad blood there. And Lawrence Okolie said he can beat Dillian Whyte, and this is one of the things that potentially has set it off. And it's also been suggested that Okolie said to Whyte, you should have taken the Anthony Joshua fight. You're pretty much left out in the cold now. But whatever the actual, it could be a confluence of factors, but whatever the case, it has certainly escalated, to a boiling point pretty quickly. And on social media, the two have been going back and forth. And also, there was that show at the weekend where there was the interview with Dillian Whyte and Kugan Cassius talking about the situation. And I'll just go to that quickly, mention some of what Whyte said, because this whole escalating situation, the back and forth, Whyte is saying, Okolie, he's been smoking too much crack. He's after media attention. He's using my name to help his career. We can fight at a catchweight. He talks a lot of shit and everyone hates him. He stinks the place out. Worst boxer ever. I'll punch him up next time I see him. And some of that has been backed up on social media too. So if you see here on screen, so he says here, I personally believe I would beat Dillian Whyte. And obviously he sparred with him a number of times and maybe he's taken some confidence from that. Also, what have we got here? This is a screenshot from that sparring, probably from the same session that clip came from. This guy, see you at the next show. Also here, Dillian Whyte, follow me. And this is that sparring clip itself. And when you look at this, I was thinking, okay, well, Okolie is having some success in here. It was just a 20-second clip. And generally when, fighters release these sorts of clips to sort of embarrass an opponent, all that sort of stuff, they do it to make the other guy look bad. But I was looking at some of this going, it's not even that impressive. Sure, he's having a bit of success, but it wasn't like he was battering Dillian Whyte to the point of embarrassment. But maybe there is some more footage because it looks like he's just about to land an uppercut as this ended here. Maybe this is going to continue on. This is the interview here. I better get off that, otherwise I'll get copyrighted. But yeah, Dillian Whyte not happy. But it's interesting because Dillian Whyte is now without a fight. They're talking he'll be coming back July, the 13th or the 18th? In July anyway. There's a date that Eddie Hearn has talked about, and they're even sort of saying Derek Chisora, he could be on that card with Joseph Parker. They could look to reschedule for that date. A number of other guys looked for potentially to be a pay-per-view event because Dominic Breazeale looks to be off the table now, but Eddie Hearn will be lobbying the WBC for them to make, if Wilder fights Breazeale, that not to be the mandatory, a voluntary instead. And some of the rationale from Hearn was Breazeale and Whyte had been ordered, so that was there. That was going to, determine sort of who moved on and at some point potentially face the WBC champion. I mean, lots of ifs, buts and maybes, but obviously Hearn feels that they have a pretty decent case. And we've seen before, Breazeale himself exploited the situation where he was meant to face Berman Stavern. That was to, even though Stavern was the mandatory, it was he was fighting him, and the winner of that would have stayed the mandatory. Stavern elevated to the main fight, and Breazeale used that to become the WBC mandatory. And Dillian Whyte was ordered to face Dominic Breazeale, and if that doesn't happen, Hearn's argument is, well, he should become the WBC mandatory if he wins that next fight because he was in that interim title fight. So there is some logic there, but Who is going to be the opponent? Because Dillian Whyte really is the guy that's been a bit of a fall guy in this situation. Well, from the outside looking in, Dillian Whyte is the one without a chair here. Deontay Wilder could face Brazil. He could have a voluntary or face his mandatory, and his mandatory is Dominic Breazeale. So whatever happens there with the wrangling, Dominic Breazeale and Deontay Wilder is looking increasingly likely for May 18th. So what does Whyte do? Because he had a title shot within his grasp to face Anthony Joshua for 3 belts and somewhere between $4 and $5 million or whatever it was. Ultimately, he didn't like some of the elements connected to it, thought he was being lowballed, and some of his gripe about it was related to a rematch split should he win the first fight. Thought Anthony Joshua was getting too much in a rematch. So, you could sort of argue that Dillian Whyte overplayed his hand here, that he's, sort of stuck himself out there on a limb, hoping everything would fall his way, and it almost looked like it did. It almost looked like he was going to fall into a pay-per-view fight with Dominic Breazeale, but that now seemingly has gone west. So what does he do next? And with this situation with Lawrence Okolie, it makes me wonder, is this something that is being potentially lined up for Dillian Whyte for a next fight? There's a number of, pros for that, but there's probably more cons, because Dillian Whyte has talked about Alexander Usyk before, the king of the cruiserweight division, as basically being a nobody. No one knows him. So what makes Usyk a lesser opponent than Lawrence Okolie? And Whyte says he'll face Lawrence Okolie at a catchweight. And I don't think they would need to do it at catchweight. It would just be at heavyweight. I think that's what it would be. Dillian Whyte, he is what he is at this point in his career. And if he was to really shred down any further, potentially he might lose something. So either that is just a hollow call out from Whyte, or this is the start of something to build to a potential fight, maybe mid-year or later. Maybe it won't be next. But is this a fight that is worthy of, one, pay-per-view, but two, are fans really interested in this? And it's been quite interesting because there's been all this coverage around what's happened, but it sort of does look like a bit of a textbook PR job where they've really tried to whip this up into a frenzy really quickly. But I just don't know, is this actually something that you would like to see or I would like to see, especially on pay-per-view? If it was just on a normal fight card and I didn't have to pay for it, well, actually, I would watch it. It'd be interesting. But there's also part of me that goes, well, Lawrence Okolie, he's been in some pretty terrible fights recently. He's actually achieved a lot in a short career of a limited amateur background. But in 2018, his stocks just fell through the floor. That Isaac Chamberlain fight and then later on that Matty Askins one, he sucked the life out of that pay-per-view card back in September on Anthony Joshua's undercard. It was one of the worst viewing spectacles of all of 2018. And sort of the hype and buzz around Lawrence Okolie, it was already on the edge there because of that stinker back in February 2018 against Chamberlain, where it was just holding galore, hugging, and he possibly should have got disqualified against Askins. Something like this is actually, with Whyte, this sort of whole hubbub that is sort of brewed up. It's a fantastic profile for him. So it makes me question, well, one, is Lawrence Okolie serious? But also, if he is serious and thinks he can beat Dillian Whyte, and the way that Whyte's talking about it, is this a potential viable fight? But yeah, I just don't know if it's pay-per-view, because effectively Whyte is bringing up a cruiserweight, and I think there would be quite a bit of criticism leveled at him, one, for doing that. It'd be different if Lawrence Okolie had come up and had 3 or 4 fights at heavyweight, acclimatized, or if he had won, belts at cruiserweight. But at the moment, he's at sort of British domestic level, looking towards world level. And Whyte has been very dismissive of Alexander Usyk, saying he's a nobody and that he would smash him. And maybe he believes that, but Usyk is not a nobody, but he's more of a someone than Lawrence Okolie at this point in his career. Some people may not like to hear that, but Usyk is a much bigger name, in my view, than Lawrence Okolie. And you can argue that in the UK that potentially it's more on a par, but worldwide, Alexander Usyk, commands a lot of respect. He's got a lot of supporters. A lot of people are looking forward to seeing him coming up to heavyweight. Lawrence Okolie, he's maybe not quite there yet, and maybe he really does believe that he can beat Dillian Whyte. He says he can, but it remains to be seen. But I'm just not so sure that I'd want to see that fight anytime soon, especially if they're looking to put that on pay-per-view. But it is a question. July is coming up. He needs an opponent, and if there are no logical fights within the Matchroom stable at heavyweight, because actually if you look at it, if he's not fighting Joshua, well, the other options, I mean, Derek Chisora's pseudo in the Matchroom stable, he's not going to fight him, he just beat him. Carlos Takam, he's been working with Matchroom, that sort of feels unlikely. David Price, he's been working with Matchroom, that's unlikely. I think Dave Allen, he's facing Lucas Brown in April, that's unlikely. I just don't know if there's anything within a Matchroom stable that you could actually pull off at this point, unless you were looking to a Joseph Parker rematch. And I'm not sure that they are looking at that at the moment. I've sort of said for quite a while now that I don't think Dillian Whyte entertains that Parker rematch because there's a lot of risk there until he's actually lost and he's coming back, and that could be a rematch that is built and makes some money for both, but probably not now. But Lawrence Okolie, yeah, he says he wants to fight him and fight him at a catch weight. Given he sort of said some of that stuff about Usyk, I just really don't know if this is sort of viable and the fans actually want it. Sure, there's been some interest in this, and he's really been trying to put it on Dillian Whyte, Lawrence Okolie has, and releasing that sparring footage, which is, some see as a bit of a no-no. But even then, I mean, was it that impressive? Were you so impressed by that footage that you would say that Lawrence Okolie would win that fight? I'm not so sure. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.